Good afternoon, everyone. Over the next few days, really, we're going to be going through all of the teams and kind of discussing our notes and getting ready for next year and basically how this season played out. What were the great ways of building an incredible side and getting lots and lots of points. In today's video, we're going to go through those last two games, but really how Todd Beavers Headgear won NRL Fantasy in 2023. So it was a very, very crazy season. We had Nigel obviously leading for a lot of this season, especially from the middle section onwards. And Todd had been sort of somewhere in the top 10 or so, top 15 for a good portion of this season as well. So it definitely wasn't all out of nowhere. And he's had an incredible season, obviously, and timed it to perfection. And we're going to focus this video around Todd and how he won NRL Fantasy in 2023. So firstly, let's get into the last two games because they did play a big factor in him winning this one with an incredibly big score, because that's what we would see here. He actually won by 100 points in the end. So it didn't end up being close. 887 for Todd and 713 for Nige. So the majority of us that had sort of anywhere between 10 and 12 players got somewhere between that 700 and 800 points. And Todd absolutely smashed it out of the park. And again, we're going to show you how that happened in a minute. So Kieran Foran, good way to finish this one with 76 points here and 72 for Addo Carr. So two guys that really averaged poorly throughout this season. And guys, I will be going through my previews and reviews for the final series. If you are interested in still following along with listening to me, following along with my content, that's what I'll be doing over the next 4 weeks. In this one here. So Tino was a big one again, 68 in his 69 minutes. So really, he proved to be pivotal in a few people just making lots of ranks and getting lots of good points over his last month, especially since he returned there. Given he was out for a few weeks there in that one following Origin. So yeah, it's an interesting one too. 2 years in a row now. He'll come into strategy for next year, and he's just done it again. Very, very similar minutes, big minutes at that, and just things become easier for him. He seems to get to the back end of the season and he's like, I'm just going to try and do a lot of this myself when their season's done. But when they're really trying to get into the fundamentals and get things going right through the beginning of the season, he doesn't seem to throw as many offloads and have as many tackle breaks and the like. Tackles and meters gained seems to be somewhere similar, but the rest of the plays doesn't really come into it along with those tries and try assists there. So yeah, strange one for Tino, but another big season for him. And he ended up making 44k in the season. So if you did start with him, it wasn't pretty, but it got better along the season. Maxi King kind of saved my rank a little bit in this one. So finally got the big minutes that I was hoping for. And we know the effort that he throws in there. So a couple of offloads in this one, a turnover tackle, and 52 in base. So great work for him. 64 in this one. Really, really important. Along with Fafita, the 54. It's been a pretty average end of the season, to be fair. Like, he absolutely smashed it from round 3 or 4 to Origin. He was incredible and he completely deserved his Origin spot. And he's such a great player and shows here he had a try assist, he had 7 tackle breaks, he had his offloads, and he does that so easily. It was the tackle numbers that kind of that hurt us a fair bit. The missed tackles, the tackles over sort of the last month or so since Origin, that base stat hasn't been there as much as it was. So that's been the frustrating thing with him. Blake Wilson had a really, really good finish to the year. Got up 206k. So if you grabbed him early, you got plenty of games out of him, which worked out awesome. Brimson, the 49 as well. So yeah, again, one of those guys, a 40 season for him. A bit down on his previous, but 49, a little bit more of what you would expect. Cleese Haas, a good one for 46 in his one. Burton, overall a pretty average season, to be fair. At 42, would have expected a lot more from the Dogs, and he's going to be one of those guys that comes into next season that bit cheaper again. So 46.7 average. We'll pop him down in the 650-ish range. And yeah, he started this year a tad over 700. So that's 715 mark. And he's going to be cheaper than that coming into next year. So he's definitely one that to look at the beginning of the season. We do need to look at their trials, though, to see how they are going to play out for sure for him on that one. And Alamotti, if he managed to get the start, he's going to be somewhere around the sort of 350 to 400 range with his price points, with his average for the year. Something to look at there in that one as well. Sexton kind of fell for cliff the last month. Reid Mahoney, 13 in 80 minutes. He's going to be really cheap coming into next year. He won't be this cheap at 461. And he's one of those guys that he seems to just hit and stick and not miss as many tackles at the beginning of the year. And I think his body kind of just falls away across the season. So tough one one for him at that. It all came down to the final game here, really. Actually, I think he ended up getting an extra trade using one of his extra. I don't think he'd used all his trades yet coming into that last game, I believe. So the great man had Timoko, and he must have had someone else, unless it was the second last game. Yeah, it must have been the second last game. He ended up bringing in Tino. I'm not sure. Must have been. Yeah, someone will tell me anyway in the comments. But it looked like it was going to be coming down to Timoko and getting 18 plus, and turns out he brought in another player. It must have been Tino. One of the two anyway. But yeah, worked out. It was coming into that, is what we thought it was. And he ended up playing a really good game, Timoko, and really showed his consistency across the season. 50 in this one, a 44 average across it. He ended up making okay cash at 86k, but at certain points it was a lot higher than that. And he'd done a really good job in that one. So yeah, congrats to Timoko for a great season. Nico Hines, a 95 for him. It'll push himself pretty well up to the million range coming into next year again. And 4 try assists in this one, the 2 turnover tackles, the try save, and just getting involved in everything. I wish the Sharkies all the best of luck coming into next week, that's for sure. Jack Williams really improved this year. And the big question from him is, like, where's his minutes going to come? I don't think it comes next year either. Similar to that with McInnes, with Finucane back, like, it'll just stick the same, I think. So 57 for McInnes was good. 57, same for Ramian. He bounced back after his poor showing last week. Crazy how different, 2 weeks can be for some of these centres. That's for sure. Yeah, Mulatalo, 46, a very low year for him as well. He had a bunch of good weeks at the start of the season and kind of fell away. Britton Nickera, 41. A 52.5 average is about similar to what we expect at the start of the year. He does always seem to be around that 50-odd mark, the low 50s to 50, and it's just never truly enough. And he has times where he goes on runs, and the Sharkies were playing well, and then when the Sharkies weren't playing well, he falls away. So last year, you can tell why he was averaging so high for a lot of it. And these last bunch of weeks has really hurt him without the tries. Tracy there, 38 in his 70 minutes. So unfortunately, he had to come off at the end. But he did really well in his spot coming on at fullback. And the big thing with it was he's actually played the last few rounds that we needed him to. Graham, the 29 as well. Unfortunate for this one. It was a low one. Last week was really good, but not so much in this one. And Seb Chris, the 8 in 59 minutes, if anyone still owns him. A bit of a tough one getting sent off in this one. So that's that. Okay, let's get to Toddy. Did you end up seeing what my rank was? 101. How tough. We'll go through my team in a full review, but it's top 101, right? It's not top 100? Or are you going to class me as I'm a top 200 player, not a top 100 player? You guys can decide on that one there. So this is Beaver's team where it ended up. And he did end up using 2 trades in the last round to get him over the line. So it ended up with Robson, Murray, Tino, Nat Butcher, Isaiah Papali'i for Feeder, Cleary, Cherry Evans, Lemuelu, Timoko, Drinkwater, Manu, Tedesco. So it looks pretty solid on up top. And then other guns, you'd say Hines, Johnson, Ponga, and Grant as a really strong 17 there. Bateman, 18th man. Horsburgh, 19th man. Then he had Graham and he had Ben Trebojevic. So what are you noticing from this team? The first thing I see is that the centres are not incredibly high priced. Looks like he would have had Lemuelu for a long time. Looks like he's had Matt Timoko for a long time. We will check the footy statistics, but that's just something I noted there, that the centres didn't spend a hell of a lot of cash in there. He has plenty of really good forwards, and again, we'll see when he brought in these couple of players there. And he has a really solid allotment of halves in Johnson, Hines, Cleary, DCE. Really, really strong wing fullbacks. Enough there of cover in each of them. He had Ben Trebojevic in the last few rounds, which worked out well. And it just seems really solid across the buck. Harrison Graham for his hooker cover, as a third hooker cover, having Robson as well. So he never ended up losing Reece Robson, and has those kind of upside plays in Tino, Nat Butcher, Murray, obviously this week, which worked out well. But we'll show those final trades as well, and how that ended up getting there. You can look at this and you go, he didn't even get extremely lucky that last few weeks, because he went Jacob Preston to Bateman in round 25 there. And what that meant was, you get a score out of him and then he ended up getting rested anyway. So it didn't really help on that one. Butcher was solid from that DeBellin trade, but you can see here, The lack of trades used in round 22, round 24, and round 26 as well gave him a chance to really launch in that last week. The other thing I really noticed in this that I thought was wild is that he never used 4 trades in one hit. There was a bunch of 3s there. You look at here, he went 2, 2, didn't trade at all in round 4. 2 again, 1 in round 6. So he saved 3 trades by the end of round 6 there. He then went 3 available in that round 7. And you look at the players that he ended up with, and it was, Hands being brought in a few weeks earlier in round 5, ended up being a mistake at that time. He then went Hands to Toby Couchman, which also ended up being a mistake. So that's the next thing I'm noticing here is that he didn't make every decision perfect. And we've seen that with my team. We've seen that with a lot of yours, that you didn't actually have to be perfect each and every trade to get things really flowing. What you didn't do and couldn't do was completely waste multiple trades. So you can see here that Brendan Hands to Toby Couchman trade was a fairly wasted trade in that one. What he did well in round 2, he traded out James Tedesco and he traded out Tommy Talau. So Tedesco didn't start incredibly well. Jack Bird was absolutely flying, and that was an incredible bring-in. Chance didn't set the world alight in that first stint, so you could say that wasn't a big win. You could have spent that money elsewhere, but alas, there were some better trades to come. Trading out Chance, it seemed like to me here that he was very quickly able to improve on his mistakes and fix those mistakes. So Chance going straight to SJ in round 3, very important. Brandon Smith early, getting him to Jacob Preston, great trade. Trindle did his job. So you can see here early that he's traded out to Cartwright in 8, which means he started with him. He started with Trindle. 2 really important guys to not waste a trade on in those first couple of weeks. He did also start with Tommy Talau, but he was able to fix that mistake quickly and get someone who was flying at that time, and that was Jack Bird. We need to actually find out if later on he actually had Hammer, which I don't believe he did. So he didn't start with the Hammer, who was actually killing it as well. He did start with Dury. So he started with Dury, Cartwright, Trindle, Tommy Talau were like his cheapies in that one. Which basically meant he got all of them right except for Tommy Talau. Which, fair, but he fixed that early. Well, eventually in a couple of trades. You then go down here. Trindle, Dury's, Hosking, and Hands. So he brought in Hands there, was a bit of a mistake. Harley Smith-Shields he started with as well, so that didn't work out. So it shows, guys, that these are a few of the players that you all started with. And Todd was able to navigate this well. He brought Isaiah Katoa at a good time as well. And just what we need to look at now is just the overall rank history. So he actually started really, really well. And this is what we usually expect from a winner. But we know with Nigel's team there, he started at 18 to 30,000 over that first few weeks. He kind of got to about 5,000 by sort of round 5 or 6, and he was in a worse spot than I was, and then happened to very quickly by round 8 move into the top spot. As I said, we won't focus on Nigel's team too much, but it just shows the disparity and the difference between a few of these guys. And this is the ideal. This is where you want to be in that first couple of rounds. If you can be a couple of thousand, very close to target, then that's awesome. By round 3, he was down to 207, and then 28th, down into 5th, and then basically hung somewhere near the top 10 is kind of what I saw there throughout the entirety of the year. A lot of time spent at 9th, and then he was down at 4th, 3rd, and 3rd, and the like, all the way through to 1st by the end of the season. So very much an incredible season at that throughout that point. And we'll notice obviously with the trades as well, where a lot of these improvements were made to get him in the right spot, but thankfully had a good starting 17, and a lot of the fringe stuff wasn't perfect. And if he got the fringe stuff right from the start, he would have been very much in that top 1,000 and very quickly into that sort of top 50 and sort of top 10. Like, he got there even quicker. He could have been very much closer to where Nigel was if he got a few of those things right at the start. But again, we can't get everything right from that position. All right, we get on to Will Warbrick, Hopgood, and Hands out for Tedesco, Ford, and Couchman. As we said, the Couchman one wasn't incredible. Getting Ford in round 7 became very, very interesting because he traded him out in round 11 there. So even that one doesn't feel like it was an incredible one. Ford kind of helped out through this sort of round 16 to 22 period until the last few weeks he's been on the bench. So even that in itself, he had Ford for a bunch of weeks, which wasn't incredible. Getting really early Katoa at a decent time, I believe it might have been in that round that he got the head knock. So he traded Katoa and Cartwright to Manu, And Phoenix Crossland, who ended up working out to be a solid pickup, which we'll see here for him, ended up trading him in round 17. So did a job for that 10 rounds there. In round 9, moved on Payne Haas and Alamotti for Nico Hines and Jareen Buller. So very, very good trades in that position there. That's the crazy thing, guys, is that you look at this and not all of these are slam dunk trades. Very limited amount of them. Bird, Johnson, Preston, Hosking, and Isaiah Katoa were probably the 5 there in that first section that were really good. And that shows the importance of having a very good starting team there. He obviously didn't start with the Drinkwater and these guys that we'll discuss in my review. And yeah, you can make, if you start with a good team, you can make mistakes around the fringes, as I said, as long as everything else is kind of going right and the majority of your squad is doing well. All right, he started with Murray. He's the first straight out. Murray and Miller and Tyrell Sloan he started with as well. So Sloan actually had a pretty good start as well. Those 3 go to Payne Haas in round 10. So he traded him out in round 9, traded him back in round 10. Very, very strange, isn't it? So, yeah, again, it's worked out. But it shows that you can do these type of moves. So Payne Haas was out in 9, back in 10. And then he came on and did a job for him. Bringing Corey Horsburgh in round 10 was an early pick. Connolly Lamuelu in round 10 was a little bit later, but it worked out well. Yeah, a little bit later than some of us did. Sort of after 5 or 6 rounds, I think we'll trade him in, which we'll look at in mind. But yeah, Pat Carrigan he started with. So that was one of those big ones that if you started with Pat, he did a really, really good job up until around this point, sort of around 9, 10, 11. And he decided to move him on there with Jackson Ford and brought in Jack DeBellin and Scott Drinkwater. So bringing in Drinky fairly early, that worked out really nicely along with Jack DeBellin. 12, Hosking, Khan-Pereira, Toby Couchman. So again, another guy he started with, Khan-Pereira. So it looks like he would have looped him correctly. Those games where he got the 40 or 50, he was able to play him. The games he went low, it didn't matter so much for him. Couchman went in there. Hopgood brought back Ben Trbojevic. That didn't work out at all. And then Harrison Edwards, someone where it worked out at certain times, fairly early. He had some good games, a few of them later on. So this was a very early pickup. So again, it shows that you don't have to get all of them right to go really well. Payne Haas comes out again, so another trade of Payne Haas. And Ben Trbojevic comes out, obviously after getting injured in his one there in that week in round 12. And then Tohu Harris and Kalen Ponga come in round 13. Tohu Harris kind of worked out for the most part. Jack Bird out for Isaiah Papali'i. Sweet. Worked out pretty well. Also, Nathan Cleary then comes out. So he started with Cleary. He started with Trent Liero, it looks like here as well. Cleary went to Moses. And that worked until it didn't it? So, again, another one where he was scoring well until he made Origin. And then things just went really downhill for Moses from there. Thankfully, for him, Todd, that he actually traded Moses in round 18 to Dave Fafita. And who was able to get a good score in round 18, if you remember. It was round 14 that Fafita got the bench, that he was benched, and he had the low minutes and didn't score very well. So yeah, Cleary to Moses, got the good weeks out of him, and then moved him at the right time. Something I didn't do personally. He obviously started with Reece Robson as well, as I haven't seen him bring in Reece Robson yet. Yeah, again, so that worked out well. It would have started with Reece Robson and Harry Grant. So right now we're looking at Robson, Grant, Payne Haas, Carrigan, and Murray. That worked out really well. He went very light down below. It was Tyrell Sloan in that fullback slot as one of his cheapies. Tommy Talau was another one. Didn't work out, but there you go. It's just off the top of my head so far. We had Liero and Isaiah Katoa to Jake Stimkin and Samuela Fainu. So again, Fainu didn't work either. He then traded him out the next week with Harrison Edwards. Oh, Harrison Edwards was the Dogs. That's what I was talking about. Harrison Graham is the Dolphin. I was thinking about Harrison Graham. Anyway, Edwards had a couple of good weeks there, but he ended up moving him on as well. And Phoenix Crossland for Haas, Adam Fanua Blake, Sandon Smith. So that was a really good week for those trades as well. And then Mitch Moses to Fafita. So he made some really, really good moves in this time period. He then went Horsburgh and Sandon Smith to Timoko and Simonson. Simonson was kind of having a really, really good run before that. And it kind of did slow down pretty close to this time, or a couple of weeks after, if I'm not mistaken. Tanner Boyd he started with as well and held him all the way to round 20, so that worked out well. Dream Buller, and Simkin were traded out there. So you can see, again, Sandon Smith only in the team for a few weeks. To Harry Grant, DCE, Harrison Graham. Very, very good selections there in round 20, getting those 3 guys into his side Tall Harris and Fanua Blake then was traded, surprisingly enough. And then Bailey Simonson for Horsburgh, Nathan Cleary and Ben Trebojevic. DeBellin to Butcher, Preston to Bateman. Tino was brought in this week, it looks like. And who was the last person that we haven't seen from this one? Fafita? Did we see a Fafita in? We mustn't have seen Fifi. Where are we? We did see get Fafita, didn't we? Yeah, back here. Who was the other? Someone will tell me. But it's silly. Lem? No, you already had Lem. Good question. This is great TV. Maybe it was just the one trade. I'm lost. Anyway, that's that. So you look at that, and it's actually a bit of a head scratcher, isn't it? As to he didn't. Most of the time you look at these and you go, "Wow, he did absolutely everything right." But hopefully, I get to talk to Todd. Somehow, in the preseason would be hectic. But my guess is that the starting side, great. We know that the top was. The mids were awesome. He had Eli Katoa, he had Trent Liero. He didn't have the Egan Butchers. He didn't have these types of guys there. So he had really, really good points up top. He had Cleary in there to be his captain, which for the most part was good. He didn't get stuck in the spending up in the centres and the wing fullback. For the most part there, kept pretty light. I imagine he looped incredibly well and managed to get everything out of his 17. Because he did make, there was definitely mistakes in those trades. He's just like one of us. So I just really want to use this example here as a way to show that we can all get to that. We can all definitely get to a really good side. And he started fairly well in the 2000s, but that's what it's about next year. Let's just get things right in our 17. And all this becomes easier. You're able to save those few trades and you're able to get a really, really good rank. So, yeah, big congratulations to Toddy in that one. It was an incredible, incredible journey. Always thought you were sitting there hanging around. Plenty of trades available, and it worked out really, really well for you. So good stuff. Congrats to Nigel for winning my NRL Fantasy Analysis Community League. He gets straight into the private group next year, which is really, really cool. Says Matt won the private group. Unfortunately, he didn't. He did end up winning the private group prize, but Mitch DeGuerra there had a cracking finish. The last 2 weeks they got him into 63rd overall. Sam beat me in the end, 78. I was at 101. Maddie 111. I ended up beating Scoop, so that's a small win for the punters in that one there. So that's a private group. Plenty of good scores. Actually a 900 in there, which is cool. Eddie beat me by 20 in the end. I thought I was going to get beat by a lot more. So that worked out right. He also won the head-to-head. Geordie Cosgrove, which is AFG Cossie, who I think came 30-something, 32nd maybe. Amazing work from him. In the podcast, end up sneaking ahead of Chris Rogue Waldo by 9 points, which is good for me. He had a bit of a tough one, 558, running out of trades fairly early. So Eddie won that. Stuart second, myself third, Chris fourth, Lockie fifth there, Rob, our head-to-head fantasy amateur, ended up doing well in that one with 846, came 154th, which was good work. Nick there from the DGens, TK at 8th, Chris C at 9th, Mark at 10th in that top 10. And the top 10 are there all in the top 751. So very, very impressive work. In that one, I did see the OTL boys did really well. Also, clearly in the top 100. A return back to some podcasting for them, but that was the podcasters. And yeah, Cowboys, they came fourth in the end. Overall a really, really good season, guys. I will get into my team. We'll get a good review into that. My decision making, things that went wrong, things that I could have chosen better. Some decisions where luck was out of favor, like the drink order from the start. He averaged what we thought and hoped that he would. It just took a long time to get there, and that can happen with the wing fullback sometimes. But big thank you again for following in those last couple of games. It did end up deciding things in the end, and I hope that it helped you win one or two of your head-to-heads. See you guys.